All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And good evening, one and all, and welcome to the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and for the next 2 hours, I am your host and your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until midnight, right here from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, on Classic 1220 and streamed around the world on classic1220.ca. If you'd like to send me an email, say hi, give me some guest suggestions, or if you have some comments, or if you'd like to contact one of our guests, the email address is xzone@classic1220.ca. My guest this hour is Ed Scorpio, and he is a professional photographer who has experience with paranormal images. And Ed is located in Port Colborne, Ontario, just on the other side of the peninsula, I guess, from St. Catharines, which is on the Lake Ontario side. Port Colborne is on the Lake Erie side. And the neat part is that Port Colborne is the first lock, or is it the last lock on the Welland Canal, Ed?
It's the last lock.
Last lock, right. Anyway, Ed, thanks very much for joining us tonight. Looking forward to sharing this time with you.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Ed, and how you got started with photography that includes the paranormal.
Well, I've been a photographer one way or another for I guess for a very long time. I started as a kid. My first camera was I don't remember the model, but it was a Minolta. It was very small and thin, kind of a spy camera looking thing. And I went from that to a Hanamex underwater camera because I was interested in diving, and sort of went onwards and upwards from there. Little more professional in probably the last 20 years, working with digital SLRs and mirrorless cameras, that sort of thing. The paranormal thing kind of came about because of my spouse. And, we started doing paranormal investigations and investigating interesting old places, some creepy, some not so much, and just interesting places that in a lot of cases were allegedly haunted. And in other cases, nobody, one way or the other, said they were haunted, but because they're older places, and older places tend to absorb a lot of energy over the years with people coming and going, and depending what goes on in those places. We've done everything from old mansions to theaters to old jails.
And where, in your opinion, is the most haunted place that you and your wife did a paranormal investigation?
Sadly, a place you can no longer access. We actually named the building the most haunted location in the Niagara region, and it was a place called the Bell Tower in Fort Erie, which sadly our two friends who owned it at the time made a great go of it. It was becoming a great community space for all sorts of things. We had the very first paranormal conference there in the area,
right?
Which went great, by the way. That was loads of fun, and we even had an overnight where some odd things happened, but there were all kinds of spirits in the building. It was once a church, and I say church, and you'd look at it and go, well, it looks more like a castle because of this. It's gigantic, it's huge, and inside is just a maze of stairways and rooms and levels. And the reason it's so big is it was built at a time when a lot of the smaller churches in the region were closing down, and their communities were kind of being absorbed into this larger church. So there, at one time, they had 120 Sunday school kids.
Wow.
All these little rooms in there, and there were a number of things in that building that, shall we say, didn't go well. Some of the spirits weren't very happy. Some of them were just passing through, literally, over and over again. There were basically spirits on just about every level. The only part of the place that still looked like a church at all was one room, and it still had the old pipe organ in it. And apparently, we didn't personally witness it, but apparently at times the pipe organ would sound
without anybody sitting at it, and
without any playing.
Just scare the bejesus out of everyone.
Yeah. There were a few loud noises on that overnight that scared the bejesus out of everyone when there was nobody there but the people locked in the room.
Wow. Now, whereabouts in Fort Erie was this?
It's right at the corner, well, not quite the corner, I guess, but almost the corner of, I can't think of the main street in Bridgeburg, which is the other side. It would be just, what is that now? East of the Peace Bridge.
Okay.
Bridgeburg is essentially where the actual town of Fort Erie started, post 1812 and that sort of thing around the fort, obviously, but where the actual sort of community town of Fort Erie started in Bridgeburg, because one of the reasons was the railway came in there from across from Buffalo.
Right.
So there was a lot of back and forth business. A lot of people that lived in Bridgeburg worked in Buffalo, because once upon a time you could do that.
Once upon a time, right. I would imagine that because of the War of 1812 and the numerous battles that were fought, that there are a lot of haunted areas within the Niagara region. You mentioned Fort Erie, and have you actually gone into the fort and done an investigation there?
Yes, without actually doing an investigation. We just happened to be there. We used to participate in some of the 1812 reenactments as vendors, and would walk around the fort. We've walked around the fort on other occasions as well, and had a few interesting experiences there, and had other people with us who had some interesting experiences there, not knowing anything about, not sort of going into it saying there's spirits here, just going for a walk through the fort and different areas of the fort and the building there, and just little things happening to people, little attachments and sounds and feelings in different areas of the building, and a few things that happened not exactly at the fort, but a little further down the road from the fort. Some things that came through spirit and later showed up on the news.
In your opinion, what is a ghost? Is there a difference between a ghost and a spirit, or are they one and the same?
Well, people tend to use them a little interchangeably, and people that make a differentiation between the two of them sometimes think of a ghost as an apparition, as like a full body apparition. Colloquially, the sort of floating sheet idea, in that you see a whole thing in front of you, where a lot of people, so the same people will look at that as a ghost and think of a spirit as something a little more ethereal that you don't necessarily see, but you might feel its presence. But I find most people use them interchangeably. We tend to use spirit more because we don't tend to come across a lot of full body apparitions. There have been some, maybe not full body apparitions, but there have been some visible sightings, if you will. But most of what we encounter, a lot of what we encounter, and a lot of, frankly, what most people are encountering that are doing paranormal investigating are encountering spirit energy, if you will. It's the energy of people that were there previously. In certain buildings, there'll be a lot of energy because there were a lot of people passing through.
Right.
For example, in any building that had servants, some of the grand old homes and some of the not even such grand old homes, there's some smaller homes in downtown Dundas, in fact, that had, they were wealthy people or well-off people, and they had a servant. But that servant would have been back and forth from the basement to the main floor multiple times a day, cooking, cleaning, serving, whatever. And that creates a residual energy on that staircase specifically. So people will walk down that staircase and go, oh, I felt like somebody passed by me. And that's the sort of thing that people get in a lot of places like that. It's residual energy. It's literally leftover energy from people being there, as opposed to a very specific being contacted by a spirit, if you will, feeling that, somebody tapped you on the shoulder in a building. That may have been somebody that lived there. It may have been somebody that resided there for another reason. We've had that sort of thing happen where the person didn't live in the house at all. They weren't part of the family that owned the house, which was a bit confusing until we did a lot more research and found out who they were and where they were from and why they were connected to that building at all.
I find it strange that you talk about residual hauntings as being emanated from someone who was alive, having their energy impacted into the area, because most of the people that I've talked to, they say that the person has had to have died in the area in order for the residual haunting to take place. And your theory makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's for people who aren't even necessarily sensitive to the spirit world, if you will, for lack of a better explanation. People who, don't necessarily think about ghosts or spirits or anything like that, and will walk into a room and be able to feel something off in the room. And that could be that something as simple as a conference was there a week ago, and a lot of hot, sweaty, noisy people in there at the conference. And it hasn't cleared out because a lot of conference rooms, as you probably know, are very enclosed, don't often have windows, old carpeting, bad ceilings, bad air circulation, and it hangs about. It literally hangs about in the air, and people feel that. You walk into the room, and it's like walking into a mist almost. You can almost physically feel it. It's a tangible energy, and that's really all residual energy is. Just some of it is strong enough and pervasive enough in certain locations that it lasts for years and years and years.
So it's more scientific than it is paranormal.
I would say, yeah. It's we try to balance the two, especially because I'm taking photographs in places, which is sort of a scientific end of things, and trying to explain, sort of the fact and fiction of these things can be explained away scientifically or logically, and these other things we don't really have an explanation for. And if we can't explain it away somehow, then it's something else. It's the Sherlock Holmes theory of, whatever seems obvious is the fact. Anything that you can't explain is the mystery.
Ed, you and I have to take our first break for this hour. Exo Nation, our guest this hour is Ed Scorpio. His website is edshots.com. That's EDDSHOTS.com. And Ed and I will be back on the other side of this break as the Exxon continues right here on Classic 1220 from our studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. And we're streamed around the world on classic1220.ca. If you'd like to send me an email, it's very simple, xzone@classic1220.ca. Ed and I will be back on the other side of this very short break. Whatever you do, don't go away. And tell me, Exo Nation, send me an email. Are you a believer or are you a skeptic? I love getting those answers from you. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Never seen eyes so blue, you know I could not run away, it seems.
Welcome back. This is the X Zone. I'm Rob McConnell, and you're listening to us on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, and streamed around the world on classic1220.ca. Ed Scorpio's our special guest, and his website is edshots.com. Now, we only don't have Fort Erie here in Niagara, but we also have Fort George and then the remnants of Fort Mississauga. Have you done investigations in Fort George?
We haven't. We've it's another one of those locations where we've been several times. Most of the times we've been there, it's been very crowded.
Right.
So sometimes when there's a lot of people in a location too, it's harder to pick things apart. And we have. It's nice that you mentioned Fort Mississauga because people forget about that all the time, except when it's being barraged by golf balls.
Yeah.
And it's really such a unique piece of history in that area, and a much more, sadly there's not much left of it, but in terms of its history, a somewhat more interesting fort than either of the other two, in terms of it being a star-shaped fort. And if you look at it on Google Maps on the satellite view, you can actually still see most of the points.
Now, what kind of photographs have you taken in both Fort George as well as in Fort Erie?
In either of those places, not so many photographs.
Really? Okay.
I've taken some in Bridgeburg. I have taken photographs in a number of other places around Ontario and in the States.
Mm-hmm.
In Hamilton, we took a number in Hamilton, different places we visited there. And I also end up getting people sending photographs saying, hey, does this look like such and such? Or look, I see a face here. Or this looks like a spirit, and it's, fog from somebody's breath because it was cold. There are some like that. But we have a lot of fun looking at photos like that too, and trying to figure out. Some of them are really obvious, and it's just like, no, we know what that is because we've seen it 100 times. And there are some that you sort of have to look at it, take a long look at it, and zoom in and check pixels on it and things like that to see if it's something somebody fiddled with, or if it really is something odd. We've seen a couple recently that were certainly odd and certainly not something somebody played with, and some of the most compelling photographs probably that I've ever seen of a spirit photograph, I guess, if you will.
Are the newer cameras for example, with the cameras that are in the cell phones that everybody has, the iPhones, are they conducive to ghost photography, or are the old cameras, the film cameras, better?
Kind of a 50-50 on that one. There are some technical issues with some of the newer cameras, specifically cell phone cameras, and they've gotten a lot better, especially just in the last probably half dozen years or so, with everybody pumping models every 5 minutes, and the camera seems to be the one big thing in the camera in the phone these days. It's people forget that it's a phone. Everybody wants to take pictures with it, but they've improved a lot. But one of the big fallbacks with mobile phone cameras is shutter lag, and if it's something you may have seen and not realized you've seen it.
Okay.
When people use a great way to see it is taking a picture of a moving fan or a propeller on an airplane. And the first time I saw somebody who had taken a picture from inside an airplane of the propeller spinning, and I looked at it and went, how did you Photoshop manufacture this thing? Because it looks like the propeller exploded.
Oh.
None of the blades of the propeller were actually attached to the hub of the propeller, and they were at different distances away from the hub of the propeller, but in the air, presumably. And that's shutter lag, because the shutter doesn't move as quickly as the object that's moving, it's like shining a strobe light on it. So you get that effect where if you've ever seen a strobe light in a nightclub, or
Yep.
you blink your eyes really fast at something that's moving, it's like stop motion photography. So you see one movement, and then you see another movement that's actually several frames removed from the first one. And that's what the shutter lag on phone cameras does. It's gotten better. I've noticed less of that sort of thing. And where spirit photography is concerned, it's less problematic because you're not really photographing moving things most cases. But also because it's a lot of them have improved resolution in low light now. Everybody wants to be able to take pictures in the club.
Yeah, night shot and the rest of it.
Yeah, take night shots. Yeah. The phone I use actually has a night vision camera. It actually has an infrared camera in it. And there are some phones that even have thermal cameras in them.
Wow.
So you have some new features now that it's like ghost hunting kit built in.
A lot of people have sent me pictures of these orbs, spirits and so on. And I look at them and I say, dust particles? Who knows? Moisture in the air? Who knows? What is your professional opinion about orb shots?
Well, you've mentioned the two most common ones, dust and moisture. The dust especially, because dust will show up in places you don't even think has dust. It's not always dust that you see, which is why when it shows up in a photograph, people freak out and go, "Oh, look, there's like a zillion orbs here." As an example, we were in an old radio station, taking a tour with the manager at the time, and it was a very small community radio station in South Louisiana, and he had mentioned that there were talks of spirits in the building, and it was a pretty old building. It was an old strip of old stores and whatnot, so it had been there quite a while. And in one of the places that we took some photographs, there was all kinds of dust in the air, but you couldn't see it when you walked in the room, and it was simply because there was old carpeting on the floor, and the dust collected in the carpet, and until you stepped onto the carpet and moved through the room, the dust wasn't really disturbed. So you take a picture of the room before you walked into it, and it just looks like a normal, slightly darkened room. It's a hallway between two of the rooms in the building. And then as you walk through it, stop and take a couple of pictures, and then look at those pictures afterwards. There's all kinds of orbs. Because, of course, your camera can pick those up, and the light from the camera picks those up, even if you're not using a flash. But that's the other thing, is people tend to use the flash on their cameras a lot when they're in the dark, because that's what your camera tells you to do. If it's dark, use the flash. I almost never use a flash on a camera. In fact, the camera I use now doesn't even have a flash. I never use it on my phone, mostly because it annoys me, because it always lights up the wrong thing, and I get a huge glare on something that I don't want. But even not using the flash, a lot of times dust particles will get picked up. We've seen similar things where people say there's orbs, and it's literally somebody with them smoking. And you can usually tell, but a lot of times people see what they want to see. And that's not to discount orbs, because I'll tell you a story about an orb. I took a picture of two friends of ours, and this was some years ago in New Orleans. And we were down in Pirates Alley, of course. Took a picture of these two lads underneath the lamp that's between Pirates Alley and the cathedral. It's just a nice spot for a picture. There's light above them. It was nighttime, so it was a great time for a shot, and they were all dressed up. And when I looked at the photograph later, there's not a little orb, but a football-sized orb by the one fellow's knee. Is about knee height. And I didn't think a lot of it at the time, because, as I say, we see these things a lot. Sometimes it's a trick of the light on the lens. It's a reflection. There's a lot of different physical reasons for it. the interesting part was I'd taken a couple of pictures of them, and several other people had taken pictures of the one fellow in particular. His wife was taking pictures of them, took some in the hotel they were staying in, took some down by the river, took some, a couple of other places that they visited. And every single picture of them, the same orb was there. The same size, the same relative location around the height of his knee, with the exception of the one by the river. He was sitting down, so it was more like his shoulder height. But that same orb was in every picture that I took, his wife took, other people we didn't even know took. all these pictures that had been taken over the course of a couple of days, that same orb followed him around the city. So that our supposition was it was probably somebody's dog, that he may have looked like the dog's owner or something like that, and the spirit of this dog followed him around the city for 2 days.
Now that's a story.
It's the most compelling orb shot I've ever seen.
Unreal. How do people react to you when they give you a photo? They think they've got the smoking gun to prove that orbs are the proof of the spirits, and you say, nah, this is what it is.
Well, it varies. It depends on how invested they are in the photograph. We've had reactions from, sort of, oh darn, or oh yeah, I can see that now that you mention it, or I'll try and explain it to folks because they want to see something.
Right.
I mean, people get pictures like that on their camera, and they want it to be, because there's so many paranormal shows and there's been so much talk about it, and it's kind of a big thing, and a lot of people have even a passing belief in it. So that's interesting too. It depends on their level of belief. There's people that they're kind of skeptical, and they'll come up with a picture like that, and they'll all of a sudden start thinking and going, gee, that really looks like something that shouldn't be there, that, not something I really believe in. And sometimes they're a little freaked out. So sometimes they're relieved when it turns out to be dust or reflection or something like that. And there are people that are so invested in that picture they took, they're so convinced that it is what they think it is what they see in their mind,
right,
that they're more than a little upset.
Oh my gosh, I guess you see them all kinds. But you're in a very special situation because number one, you do the investigation. Number two, you investigate what you see, and you try to come up with reasonable explanations, pro or con. When we come back on the other side of this break, I'd like to talk to you about the pareidolia aspect of everything. So please stand by. Ed Scorpio's our special guest this hour, Exonation. His website is Ed Shots. That's EDDSHOTS.com. And we're talking about the paranormal. Talking to Ed about his quest into the investigation of the paranormal as a professional photographer. Very interesting, and we'll both be back on the other side of this break as the X-Zone continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, right here on Classic 1220. Streamed around the world on classic1220.ca.
When I was not so strong, good man came to me, never seen eyes so blue.
I don't know where I'm going, but I sure know.
Exonation, Ed Scorpio's our special guest. His website is edshots.com. And you're listening to the X-Zone right here on Hometown Radio, Classic 1220. Ed, the pareidolia effect, how does that relate to the paranormal in your opinion?
That's probably one of the biggest contentions, if you will. The simple explanation for pareidolia is you see what you want to see, or more specifically, you see what you're used to seeing. So if you see something in a photograph that seems kind of ethereal and misty, but you see a face in it, first of all, you're used to seeing faces, so it's an easy thing for you to. It's like staring at clouds. I mean, that would be a great example. Staring at clouds and seeing shapes in the clouds that you recognize. You would see faces or elephants or dragons, depending. And pareidolia is kind of the same idea, where you would see something that you're familiar with, and in a lot of these cases, specifically with paranormal stuff, you're seeing what you want to see. You're so invested that you want to see a spirit or a full body apparition or something, a carriage and horses driving by, that you'll see that in the photograph.
There are times when people go on tours, ghost tours, or ghost investigations, and certain people within the group will see or hear or feel something. Other people will see, hear, or feel absolutely nothing at all. Any idea why this happens?
Sure. That's different people are. They have different levels of things that they feel or don't feel in some cases. We've also, as humans, we've been brought up for the most part to not believe in these things. For kids who had that imaginary friend when they were 5 and 6, were told that that's not something we do, and it's just your imagination. It's nice to have an imagination, but you have to grow up now and forget all those things, yada yada. And that's kind of part of it's kind of the mindset. And some people stick to that. And there are people who are more sensitive to these things than others. Which is why we have things like mediums, and people even who aren't mediums particularly, but the sort of people who will walk into a room and go, "Oh, I felt a chill when I walked through the door there," and the person right next to them will go, "What are you talking about? It's 72 degrees out."
Right.
Or they'll walk through a space. We had a neighbor actually who used to walk her dog along the train tracks in Hamilton, in this particular neighborhood. And she said there was one spot that she walked through, and anytime she walked through it, that short space of about 10, 12 feet was freezing cold, and the dog would start freaking out. And she had a 130-pound Rottweiler, so he didn't freak out at too many things.
Right. You're talking about invisible friends, and I've been at many bars in my many years on this beautiful planet where there were grown-up adults talking to invisible friends. So we have to believe children. I think children are innocent, and they're not under the influence of alcohol when they see these invisible friends or have contact with them. Once again, doing this show many years, I've heard stories of children seeing angels, children seeing deceased grandparents and deceased relatives that they didn't know, but the information that they gave mom and dad could have only come from this child seeing or interacting with this deceased person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's really the crux of the matter is, we always say kids and animals, because kids and animals don't have that filter built in yet. Animals don't have it at all, because you can't tell an animal they're not seeing the thing that you don't see, that
right.
they clearly do see.
Yeah.
With kids, it takes a little more practice. And I have a good friend whose son had this imaginary friend when he was little, and she's more of a believer. So she wasn't one to say, "Oh, that's not real," or don't do that.
Right. It
was more like, "Who are you playing with?" "Oh, so and so, my friend." And there's clearly nobody in the room with them. And she sort of smiled and went, "Okay, well, just play quietly," sort of thing. And it was fine until his imaginary friend started waking him up in the middle of the night and scaring the heck out of him, because it was the middle of the night and he was asleep. But then, as we had to explain, your imaginary friend, if he's in the spirit world, doesn't have any concept of time like we do. We know day and night and 6 o'clock or 4 o'clock or 12 o'clock. People in the spirit world don't have that restriction. That's something that we've created for our world, because we have things like school and work, and you have to be places at certain times. In the spirit world, that doesn't apply. Much as people say, how somebody's stuck in a house when they die because they died in that house. Not necessarily, because their spirit, their energy, their pure energy at that point, they can go anywhere. Whether they want to go anywhere is another story. Whether they understand that they've passed away is sometimes another story, because that has happened too. But it's not, they don't have, the spirit world doesn't have the limitations that we do. And that's the same thing with trying to take photographs of things that aren't there, particularly, is that it would take a lot of energy for a full body apparition to appear. In order to be able to see that with your eyes or your camera, that would take an awful lot of energy on the part of that particular spirit. And frankly, most of them don't have that much to expend. It's sort of the same thing we always say, when people die, they don't get a flash course on how to speak English. So if the spirit in a certain place spoke Spanish in life,
Right.
they're going to keep speaking it when they're dead.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They don't learn English.
No.
And that kind of bothers you. You see a lot of shows where every spirit they encounter speaks perfect English, and that's clearly not the case. We've had many interactions with spirit where they're speaking different languages. We don't not even languages we necessarily understand. Sometimes it's trying to make notes phonetically of what's being heard, and trying to figure out, first of all, what language that is, and then finding somebody that can translate it if it's not something we can plug into Google Translate.
As a photographer, have you found that your batteries die faster in a location where there's supposed to be paranormal activity compared to other locations where there's no paranormal activity?
Interestingly enough, I think maybe once that happened. In which case it was probably more a case of my battery wasn't holding a charge properly. I know it's different for different people for different reasons, and it may be some environmental reasons with moisture and
The location of the shoot, yeah.
things like that. Yeah, I haven't really encountered that. We have had odd occasions where things aren't working exactly as you expect them to. I'm not really batteries running out so much as quirkiness with the mechanics of things. So
I know.
you're pressing a button that you expect to take a picture, and it's not taking a picture or doing much of anything else, but it's on and it seems to be working. And sometimes you just have to reset the camera, and then it works, and you're like, well, I don't know what that was all about.
I know the same was true when we were doing Creepy Canada, that, people would ask us, well, do your batteries die? Yes. Really? Mine too. They die right away. And I'd say, well, no, I didn't say they died right away. I said they died. That's what batteries do. They run out of energy, and you replace them and you charge it. And for some reason, there are those members of the paranormal community who swear up and down they go into a haunted place and their batteries and their cameras always go down. But the batteries in the K2 meters don't go down. The batteries in the tape recorders. You're like, oh, come on.
Yeah, good point. I never thought of it that way, actually. That's pretty funny. Yeah, the noisy things never run out of battery. Sometimes you wish they would.
Yeah. How do you try and make sense of how EVPs work? Now, I've been in audio and radio for a great number of years, and I have a problem with the concept of EVPs.
Again, that's an interesting subject, because I too have been around recording media for many years, including radio and television. And it used to be you could make all kinds of excuses for things that were running on tape.
Right.
That stuff that nobody knows what it is anymore. And I sort of got that, because you had dirt on the heads, or the tape tension was off. You could get all sorts of weird things happening. Now that everything's digital, that's kind of an advantage in the sense that we don't have moving parts anymore, so things tend to break down less. And it also gives you we have the advantage now of you can pull something into an editing suite and slow it down and reverse it and put the gain up and do stuff that if you did it before, the sound would just be completely inaudible. We've had experiences with EVPs, some of which were generated through some of the ghost tech, if you will. Some of the machines that they'll spit out words at different times. There's the one that it sounds like a bad radio dial running up and down the AM dial, and it'll spit out words here and there occasionally that may or may not be relevant, except we've had some that were quite relevant. And it's anything like that, anything like EVPs, especially, you have to have a context for it. So a lot of these things are they're spitting out words from a dictionary, essentially. They have a built-in dictionary of 1,000 words, let's say, or 2,000 words, whatever it is. And they're, for the most part, common words. It has to have a context usually the context is you're asking questions out into the ether and you're hoping somebody's going to answer you back. And whether it's coming electronically through a device or it shows up later on the recorder that you had running, slightly two different things, but sometimes those two things will match, and that's telling you something. If what you heard coming out of your ghost device that's spitting out words from a dictionary, and then later on you listen to an EVP that has that same group of words or couple of words or a name on it, and names are that's kind of the big thing that, like, we're always big on names, because it gives us a context, it gives us something to research. If you get a name, whether it's a medium hears it or it comes out on an EVP, and you can associate that name with that location somehow historically, then it gives you a context of, well, gee, that might have been this person, or it might have been the voice of this person reaching out from the beyond, just to say, hey, I was here, thanks for visiting. Sometimes it's more than that. Sometimes you get, the famous one is always there's a bunch of ghost hunters in the house and somebody gets the word on their EVP or their device that goes, "Get out," and everybody runs screaming, or
Yeah.
the camera angle jumps all over the place, and it makes for good television.
It does. Ed, you and I have to take our final break, so please stand by. Thanks very much for coming on the show. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And Ed and I will be back on the other side of this break, Exo Nation. And if you'd like to find out more about Ed, the work that he does, visit his website, edshots.com, edshots.com, EDDSHOTS.com. And we're coming to you still from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, right here on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, and streamed around the world on classic1220.ca.
I don't know where I'm going. Every time I see your face, it reminds me of the places we used to go.
Ed Scorpio is my very special guest this hour, Exo Nation. If you'd like to find out more about Ed, his website is EDDSHOTS.com. That's edshots.com. And Ed is based in Port Colborne, Ontario, right here in the Great Niagara region. First of all, Ed, thanks very much for coming on the show. Great pleasure talking to a fellow Niagara-arian. Is that what we're called, Niagara-arians?
Something like
Oh,
that.
who cares, right? We're here in Niagara. Let's just leave it at that.
There you go.
During the break, you were telling me that there's a photograph that you'd like to talk to us about.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I've taken a lot of photographs, especially on paranormal investigations. Camera's running almost constantly in some cases, and I've taken photographs of an awful lot of nothing, for the most part. There's the special photographs they're very rare, which is why there's one reason why they're special. And I've taken my share of photographs of dust and moisture and reflections and strange lighting effects that we eventually figured out was a car passing by and the light shining through the window through the blinds, all sorts of things like that. But there's been a few. I was mentioning that orb photograph earlier. And then another one I wanted to mention was, this was a sort of a special little tour that we took into an old theater in Hamilton, Ontario. And it had been out of use for some years and was under a bit of renovations, but we were allowed in on this particular tour. There was a small group of us. Of course, I had my camera with me. And while folks were chatting and talking about the history of the place, I had my camera balanced on the back seat at the back of the theater where we're standing, aimed at the front of the theater, at the stage. And the only things on the stage, the curtains, there were still curtains hanging. There was one large work light, I guess it would be, sort of in the right-hand corner of the stage. And over towards the left of the stage, there was a table and a chair, like a desk and a chair. And there was some scaffolding in the background for like lighting scaffolds. So not really a lot there. There was nobody else in the theater but us. We were all collected at the back because that's as far as we were allowed in because of construction and because it was an old building, and they weren't entirely sure if there were pieces of it falling down. There had been a small accident with part of the building that fell on the top of another building. So
Ouch.
they were very cagey about it. But I sat there for a bit and just put my camera on multiple photograph and just hit the button and took a bunch of shots in a row, probably like half a second in between them. Took several shots, and when I looked at them afterwards, I won't call it an orb because it was really more of a light. It was like a shot of plasma that went from the left-hand side of the stage across the stage and got bigger as it went along and then disappeared.
Wow.
And it was a bright, sort of a bright greenish glow. And as I say, there was nobody on the stage. There was nothing on the stage that was moving. The work light that was on the stage was just a bright white light in the far right-hand corner. And this anomaly started on the left-hand side. And there was about 4 frames out of the shots I took of this anomaly going through the stage, essentially, sort of through the stage at about the height of somebody's head, I would say. And just it was one of those things where there was no physical explanation for it. There was no sort of scientific way to say, oh, that work light was reflecting off one of the light scaffolds. And sure, there might have been a flash. There might have been a couple of things. My camera wasn't moving either. So the camera was still, whatever this was, moved across the view of my camera. And I pretty much had a view of the whole stage from where I was because I was right at the back of the theater and, of course, raised up as the back of the theater would be. So that's one of those ones that there was just no explanation for it. It was much more than an orb. It seemed to have substance to it of some sort, and was bright enough that you could see it from that distance. Even though looking at the stage as I was taking the picture, you physically didn't see it. I physically didn't see it, and I didn't even notice it in the photograph till I looked at it later when I was developing the photos and digitally developing, of course.
Yeah.
But it's quite the anomaly, and that's one of the very few and certainly one of the most interesting ones I think I've ever taken.
Have you ever gone into a graveyard and taken photos, and what results have you gotten?
I've photographed many graveyards, in many graveyards in various places. Interesting thing about graveyards, people always get creeped out by them, and they're always haunted, and the dead people don't hang around graveyards. I mean, if you were pure energy, the last place you'd want to hang around would be the dark, dank cemetery. Now, that being said, there have been a couple of occasions where there have been encounters with spirits of small children in a family cemetery. This was a private family cemetery that we happened to have access to on an estate, and there were several encounters with some small children being mischievous, and once or twice, pardon me, we've had sort of misty images that weren't explained away as a fog or a dampness, even though you get that in some cemeteries certainly.
Yeah.
We've photographed in the daytime and the nighttime in some rather famous cemeteries that people like to claim are all kinds of haunted, and they're not. And most of them aren't. But the family cemetery was kind of unique because it was the family's property. So the fact that you'd come across spirits of children in there, not that unusual, because kids that lived on the property at the time, young kids would have played in the cemetery. They would have been around there. Their relatives are there. It's part of the house's property, so they haven't wandered off somewhere. Where most public cemeteries are big empty spaces, and most of the things we photograph in there are just really interesting tombs.
Somebody I know calls them a cadaver parking lot.
I'll have to remember that.
Yeah,
That's
use
good.
Use it. When it comes to the most famous haunts that are featured on most of the ghost shows on TV, for example, the Waverly, what is it? Do they? I can't understand why the spirits remain there if all these people keep going there. Like, if I was a spirit, I'd get really ticked off, and I'd say, "To hell with this place! I'm dead. I'm going somewhere else." How do you rationalize that as a professional yourself?
Well, again, there's kind of a combination of things there. Places like that, a lot of it's residual energy, of course, but a lot of it is because the place has been made famous by a ghost show or paranormal show or somebody investigating it, whatever the case is. Sometimes strictly by the history attached to it, whether that history is true or not. Again, it's like the pareidolia effect. People expect to see it. People want to see it. They insist that if they go there, they're going to see ghosts. They're going to see spirits. They're going to get touched on the shoulder or have their hair pulled or whatever the case is. And a lot of times it's not necessarily because spirits are there. It's just because they're so invested in the experience. They so want to have that experience that it's going to happen whether it happens or not. They're going to take that feeling in with them. You're walking into it expecting it. And that's actually something with us is we go places without really expecting anything. If there is a history to it, the only history we're usually interested in is the actual history, like when the building was built, who the family was that built it, and maybe a couple families later that lived in it. But don't talk to us about ghosts or spirits or hauntings or, you can say, yes, we think it's haunted, or no, we don't think it's haunted. A couple of cases we've had people say, please tell us it isn't haunted. And once specifically, we had somebody come and yell at us and say, don't talk about my haunted building. Because it freaked him out so much that it was haunted, and he thought he was going to get bad press because of it or something, I guess.
And
if it's famous, people expect it. They expect it to be there. It's like Disneyland.
And if somebody listening tonight wants to become an enthusiastic paranormal photographer, what hints would you have for them? What advice?
Well, the first thing would be, as Ferris Bueller said, keep an open mind. You never know what'll drop in.
Now, there's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Because you really have to have an open mind. You have to open mind, first of all, going into places to investigate them, not expecting that you're going to go in and photograph all kinds of spirits and ghosts and whatever. You have to have an open mind to be very critical of the photos that you do take when you're looking at them afterwards to say, yeah, I kind of think that's dust. Or, yeah, it kind of looks weird, but where was I? What was and there was a window here and there was something there, and I wonder if just the light bounced off. And because we live in the digital world, you can take 20 pictures and look at them 2 seconds later.
Yeah.
And just have a quick review. Even with a digital SLR camera, you can review them very quickly after you take them, so that you get a brief idea of, if you've taken 6 pictures in a room and 5 of them look the same and 1 of them doesn't, why doesn't that one look the same? And was it something you did? Did you move to a different location in that space to take the picture? Was the lighting different? Did a car drive by? Things like that. You have to debunk your own stuff more than anyone else's.
Does it matter whether or not the camera is set for autofocus?
Not really.
No way.
Not really. As a professional photographer, we try and avoid certain types of autofocus, but understanding that for most people, that's the easiest way to take pictures. And cameras today, whether it's in your phone or whether it's a physical camera, a point and shoot, a digital SLR, or whatever, they're designed to have a very, very good quality of autofocus. The only thing I'll say about that is sometimes autofocus can be your enemy. If you're trying to focus on something and something passes in front of you and pulls the focus away from the something you're trying to focus on, that's what you're gonna take a picture of, and what you're trying to take a picture of is gonna be blurry. And sometimes that messes up your shot in such a way that it might look like it was something else that it wasn't. So again, that's where you have to be critical of not only what you're taking pictures of, but how you're taking them as well. If you're shooting with autofocus, I'm not going to debunk anybody for doing that, but you have to understand how autofocus works too, and especially on the camera in your phone. Funnily enough, people using the camera in their phone often forget to focus. So there's a tip right there, is learn how your phone focuses. Most of them, it's tap on the object that you're trying to shoot, or the area that you're trying to shoot. You just tap on the screen. Usually that centers your focus to that spot.
Ed, I hate to do this, my friend, but we've run out of time for tonight. I want to thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to the next time you and I meet here in the X Zone. And happy trails and happy travels to you and your team. And once again, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks very much, Rob. I appreciate it. And thanks to all the crew in the background.
All right. Take care of yourself, my friend. And have a great new year. In fact, have a spooktacular new year.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye now. Exonation, if you'd like to find out more about Ed Scorpio, his website is edshots.com. I'll be back on the other side of this break as the X Zone continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, right here on Classic 1220.